So quilting on a flatbed is a lot easier than on a smaller table, but with our work spray basted in the back layers and then with this basting on the top layers, we should be able to control it even if we're quilting on a smaller table. This flatbed uses the old style feet and it's a completely mechanical machine. Here my project is on my 153 Bernina, which is close to 20 years old now, and it uses the new style feet. The aftermarket table is almost 17 3/4, almost 18 inches by 24, and the little factory extension table is 8 1/4 by 15 1/2. You'll want to manage your layers and puckers. And you just do this by sort of smoothing neighboring areas as you work, and mainly by working systematically so that you're attaching down top pieces that attach everything around them, and then being careful to smooth work out before you put it into the machine and start quilting it. The area I want to do first is across this whole bottom, and I'm going to couch it. And the reason I mentioned the feet that my machines use, this is the braiding foot. It fits my other sewing machine, and you can put the thread that you want to couch through this hole, and then it will make it so that with the needle right behind it zigzagging, you can just neatly zigzag this down. What I've noticed though is that there are these nice eyelash hairs, and they feed through the hole and they get pulled out and then zigzagged, almost encased into the zigzag, and so you lose all the eyelashes. I've actually sat there for half an hour picking eyelashes out, and you never really get them all out. And so I'm going to do this on this machine with a regular foot. And I'm going to set my zigzag not very big. My zigzag's a 2. I'll just start over here. And you'll need to go slow. I'm going to go a little bigger, like a 2 1/2. Because you need that zigzag. And I'm kind of low, so I'm going to get up on my piece really fast here. And this machine doesn't have needle down. Use your needle down if you've got it on your machine. And then so what's happened is I've run out of bobbin thread, and so I need to reload my bobbin. And it's probably just as well for me to show what I'm going to do. Going back about 1/2 inch or give or take, I'm going to sink in to my work on that same area and pull up my threads. And then I'll do a very small, barely a stitch, to kind of like tiny little stitches starting out when you're free motion quilting. So I'll just kind of tack that like that, and then I'll get back to my 2 1/2 or so. And I'll finish stitching this down. So that's all there is to couching. See these little green stitches right there? That is where I ran out of bobbin thread down here, so I overlapped by that much, did really tight zigzag, and then was able to come down and finish out. But if you miss a spot, just go back and attach that part. Even without using the braiding foot, a lot of this gets tied into that zigzag. And so you can sit later and or pull those out, tease those out. And I'm going to free motion quilt all the way across this and all the way along the bottom. And you know, I find that at a certain point, leaving this in here where I have to worry about picking it out is more trouble than it's worth. And so I like to pull out this top thread, and you can just pull it and see how that washable just breaks up, and some of it might stay in there, but it's going to wash out, so you don't need to worry about it. I just get it out of there. So a lot of times I do these kind of peacocks across the bottoms, but I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I'd like to put a little bit more movement in my cut line at the top. I always like to do, right on this margin, a quick little test. Now I can check how my stitches look on the bottom. I think it's going to look okay. And I like to not stitch off the edge if I can avoid it, because it can break your thread, especially when you're going fast. So I don't have very far to come over, but I'm going to do this. Now, I used quilting gloves for years in the beginning, and they're very helpful. And I would be using them now if it were cold in here, or if I were having trouble holding on. I don't mind the way that looks at all. I'm caught up on my eyelash. I'm just going to clip it. If you wanted, you could quilt first, then couch. So I'm going to go across the top, and it's sometimes when you're quilting, you have a tendency to just follow the shape of the piece of fabric. And so I'm going to remind myself with my chalk that I would like to have some high and low points in my line. And so I'm not even really thinking about this, because I'll think about it more hopefully when I'm quilting. So I didn't labor over this, and it's upside down, and you know, it's going to overlap. These go all the way to the edge, so it's going to overlap the water no matter how much variation I put in there. But I'm just reminding myself not to be too boring, not just go straight across here. You could do that, but that's not what my plan is. We can watch how I did the near shore on the mini right now. The first thing that I did was add in the side tree pieces, because I decided the near shore should overlap them. And you can see me dealing with those. I just cut them, draw a little with chalk, clip my basting away, and then tuck them underneath the near shore. I place them flush with the bottom edge of the live area of the quilt. I made these little clips in the hand basting right before quilting, so there's no need to rebaste. You can also see me free motion quilting across the near shore of my mini. I just make a line of peacock feathers in variegated primary colors. It's sort of a standard move. I don't know why, but I've always sort of insisted on starting most of my pieces this way. It gives me a shoreline to trim that has a lot of movement. One of the things I wanted to do was show trimming, do a little refresher on trimming, and a little pair of embroidery scissors with a curved tip are great for this. And I've had 5 or 6 pairs over the last 20 years, and I did finally notice that the ones that seem to be the best say Finland right here. The ones that say Finland are more expensive than the craft ones, and they'll both work. And so we're just gonna cut, and we don't want to cut too close, but we also don't want to cut too far away. The most important thing is to keep your trim tolerance at about 1/8 of an inch, and 1/16 of an inch is definitely too little. Of course, tight stitches make stable edges, but we also want to avoid trimming long straight stretches along the grain. In this little mock-up, starting on the top left, you can see this curved line will be pretty stable once trimmed. So will the jagged points coming down below, because none of those lines is actually cut vertical or horizontal on the grain. They're essentially all cut on the bias. The area below that looks like a step is the least stable of all, especially in the riser area where many threads have torn free. Finally, along the bottom, there's a straight line of stitching, but the little wiggle that's trimmed along the edge helps stabilize it. It's a bit like using pinking shears on a seam allowance. And now, I know that my fabrics go all the way down, and so I can cut into these in some places. And I'll do that a little bit now, and then sometimes even after washing. And if you make a mistake and cut into your stitching, we'll figure out a way to fix that later. There are lots of things we can do to fix a little mistake. And honestly, sometimes those are the coolest techniques that you develop, where you really want to fix something and something great comes out of it. So you have to turn your work around quite a bit. This is again where having all the spray based in this helps as I'm crunkling this up. Helps keep everything in place. So this is basically the bottom of my quilt, and we can decide later if we like it. It reminds me a little of one of the pictures. It has a log that was on the shore in one of the photos I took one of the nights we went out. And I do think it's nice to kind of keep your work neat if you can, so you can see what you're doing. And so I try to keep the shavings cleaned up as I go. So this is the bottom of mine. Thanks.